Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. My name is Oluyemi Adeosun, and tonight we'll be looking at the topic compensation benchmarking for equity and sustainable business. And our facilitator for the first time is Mercy Ekop, and I would like to read her profile. Mercy is a global compensation analyst and HR research consultant with extensive expertise in compensation strategy, pay benchmarking, total reward design across Africa and global context. She has worked with international NGOs, private sector organizations, and development agencies to create reward systems that are both competitive and sustainable in over 40 countries. Mercy's work at CCHRC involves developing compensation policies, job design frameworks, and benchmarking studies that enable organizations to attract, retain, and engage top talents while maintaining affordability. She has supported organizations like the West African Network of Peace Building in navigating inflationary pressures, equity consulting, equity challenges, and market competitiveness in Nigeria and West Africa. In addition to our consulting practice, Mercy has facilitated leadership training for HR managers in the INGO Forum and business managers across Africa, focusing on linking compensation world business environment. She holds an MBA in Human Resource Management from Liverpool John Moores University. She also has a World at Work certification in Total Rewards Management. Mercy brings a practical yet strategic perspective to compensation conversations. Our mission is to empower African HR leaders to use data-driven approach to compensation, enabling equity, transparency, and long-term business sustainability. Speaking to us on the topic, compensation benchmarking for equity and sustainable business, let's welcome Mercy Ekop. You have the floor.
All right, thank you, Dr. Oluyemi. I'm very excited to be having this conversation this evening, just because I like talking about HR data and how we can use data in human resources to better improve our systems and design systems that work for us across board. So today I'll just be focusing on compensation benchmarking and equity and sustainable businesses. So introduction has already been done. So I'll talk about why benchmarking matters in Nigeria, what benchmarking is, especially with compensation, and then how we can balance designing our compensation systems with business sustainability and affordability. And then, of course, I'll be happy to take questions. So he's already talked about me. The first question I'd like to ask is if you're, and I know that not many of us are able to answer, but I'd like to know if your organization currently uses a salary scale or a structured benchmark system. So it's like ABC options. And what you could do for me is just to type in the chat, just A or B or C, to give me an idea or to give us an idea of what the market looks like right now, because we are all HR people and we work in organizations. So it would be nice to just know what the market looks like as our sample survey today. So that's the first question I like to ask. And so it's okay if you can unmute to answer, that's fine. But if you can't, that's also fine as well. All right, so unfortunately, I can't see the chat box. I'm not able to tell if, let me see if I can see if anybody is responding. Let me see. Oh, yes, we have responses. Oh, A. So somebody has a fully, that's so nice, fully. Okay, we have B, we have C. So I think with these three responses, I think it's spread across. Well, I'm still hoping other people respond so that we can know what it is like, but I'll just continue. Yeah, so more people are responding. There's a B and a C. Yeah. So while I did that, I think we all can agree that not many organizations have a structured salary scale or benchmark system. In fact, I had a conversation with someone, I think 2 years ago, and then I was asking the person, oh, do you guys have a what's your salary scale like in the organization? Person is a HR person, and the person doesn't know what a salary scale was. And I was like, okay, so how do you pay salaries? And they're like, your negotiation skills, like depending on how you negotiate for the role. And I'm like, okay, that will cost a lot of internal equity. And then we had the whole conversation. So I want to talk about why benchmarking matters in Nigeria. Then I'll talk about what benchmarking is. So there's something that I've noticed over the years of I've worked in HR for a very long time, for like 10 years. And there's something I've noticed within that 10 years is employers like to say that there's always someone that can do the job. So you hear comments like, oh, you can fire the person, we'll replace easily. And that's true. Nigeria is very saturated with talent. And what that means is that there's a lot of people in the pool, in the candidacy pool. But the truth is that for you to be able to sustain your business for a long period of time, over time, you would require hiring really good talents, because there's something that's hiring sub talent or talent that do not meet par does to your business. It affects like your overall business goal. It affects a lot of things. So yes, Nigeria's market is saturated, but we do not have so many talents. In fact, it has become such a problem that the UNDP, the Nigerian government, have pulled out programs to try to help the problem we have. The problem is that we have a lot of people that are in the job market, but they do not have the skills that are required for the jobs that we have today. So there is a skill gap there is a lot of research papers online showing that there's a skill gap between the candidates or the job pool and then the people that actually have the skill that is actually required to perform, especially when it comes to like IT skills and communication skills. So it's very important to be able to pay strategically so that you can then hire good talent that would stay and not just pick whatever is in the market. And then there's something new that's happening. There's a talent drain that's happening in Nigeria right now. I promise you, I have experienced it because I worked globally for over 2 years for an organization in the US, and I'm living in Nigeria. In fact, if you go to Instagram today, you would see like skills. You see pages and Instagram pages that would advertise some kind of skills that you would require, and then you get a job that will pay you in dollars. And of course, people want that, right? So there's that talent drain. I mean, it used to be Japa, but now it's no more Japa because you can work in Nigeria and earn in the dollar. So people are leaving, top talents are leaving Nigerian-owned or Nigerian businesses to work with international organizations while remaining in Nigeria. There's inflation, and it's not so much of the inflation, but the instability in the market. So for example, the inflation was like 30-something% last year, and this year is down to 24%, and only God knows what happens next year. So the fluctuation and the volatility of the market is really high. So that's another reason why your compensation design is very important. And then, of course, if you work in the NGO sector that I've done, like I have done over the past 6 years, you would know that there's some sort of compliance from our donors to ensure that we have a certain standard when it comes to compensation. Because, that's the standard in the West. So they're trying to reflect it in their program implementation, especially with equity in pay, because that's another thing that we're struggling with. And then organizations also struggle to balance affordability with competitiveness because of some things that people assume when it comes to being competitive. So they struggle like, can I afford to compete with like Coca-Cola when I'm just a small business? So those are some of the reasons why it's important to benchmark and then design your compensation with the benchmarks. Please, there'll be time to ask questions at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to like take your questions down or probably even write them in the chat. We'll respond to them. All right, so I want to talk about what benchmarking is. So compensation benchmarking is a structured process of comparing pay levels with pay levels and reward practices with relevant market data. So globally, especially with international organizations, we have standard organizations where we buy market data from. What that means is that an organization is able to gather data from Coca-Cola, MTN, and just all the organizations you can think of in Nigeria. And then they have the data of how much is being paid to at each level. So it's not just salary. So it's like allowances, benefits, rewards, the pay time off you're offering, everything. So when you have that market data, you can take your own organization's data, what you pay, and then compare it with what your competitors are paying, and then see whether you are competitive in the market. So if you are paying well enough, if you are paying below market, and if you are paying above market. Now, the first thing that you have to do when understanding benchmarking is to look at your job matching. So when you're benchmarking jobs, or when you're comparing jobs with other organizations, you don't compare job titles, because somebody that is a HR manager in an organization A might be doing the function of a HR officer in organization 2 or organization B. And remember that it is the skill we are looking for, it is the job we are looking for, not the job title. So you do what we call job matching or job design and architecture. What that means, I'm going to show you what a job architecture looks like, is that you break down your jobs in your organization. And I mean, job matching is not just for compensation purposes. You use it for reward, you use it for growth, showing growth trajectory in your organization. There are a lot of reasons why you match your jobs, but for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to be looking at just compensation. So you need to align your roles with the market equivalent to be able to compare evenly. If in organization A, a HR officer needs just 2 years of experience to be able to perform the function of that role, and in organization B, a HR officer needs 7 years experience to perform the function. And yes, it's very possible, because depending on what the organization does, depending on the scale or the scope of the organization, the size of the employees, there are a couple of things that matter when you do job matching. So if organization B needs just 2 years experience to be able to perform maybe a BSc or sometimes even a HND, and organization B requires 7 years experience with extensive experience in HR, it's not the same person you are looking for in the market. So if you compare your salaries, you will be doing injustice to both organizations, because the skill you require for each role is different. That is why job titles are not what we use to do job matching, because people bear fancy titles. I mean, you know that if you just open your LinkedIn today, you will see random job titles that sometimes are not realistic in that position. I saw an organization of like 10 people or so hiring for a COO. And I'm like, do you need a COO for an organization of 10 people? And the person was paying 150K. That was the advertised salary. And I'm like, of course, it's 150K because it's a small size, but you've given the role COO. So how are we going to balance this? So if you say you want to compare your jobs, and then you compare COO with, and that COO now, say COO of Coca-Cola in Nigeria, and that COO, of course, you know that it's not comparable in terms of everything required in that role. That's why it's good to match jobs. Now, when you're matching jobs, there are different factors you look at. You look at like stakeholder engagement, both internal and external, the level of autonomy for that role, and a lot of other factors. The job, the qualifications required to do that role, and then it's like dissecting the role and then looking at the role extensively, the job summary, and then you can now know how to align your job architecture or set your job. I'm going to give you a sample. I'm going to show you a sample of what it looks like so that it will be clear. Now, after doing this, you get your market data. Some organizations use consultants, which is what has been happening in Nigeria. In fact, in Nigeria, we use consultants because we do not have a standard organization that does this in Nigeria. For global context, we have organizations like Birches, we have MESA, we have Conferry. I have used all of these organizations, and I can tell you for a fact that because they are global organizations that are seated in the US or seated in Mercer is in the UK, they do not take into cognizance local context when collecting the data that they use to design their reports. And so it's a struggle. When I worked in apps and I was managing, like, I think I was managing about 30-something countries, I could see the lapses because I am a Nigerian in Nigeria. And yes, they are giving me data for the INGO sector in Nigeria. But there were some things that did not make sense because I understand our context. So for example, our labor law says, I think 6 days of leave. I hope they've changed that. But almost every organization, that's annual leave now, almost every organization in the INGO sector was offering more. But these people were not taking cognizance of in collecting the data, because it's what they collect from the organization that they use to design these reports that they share to us that we can now use to compare our salaries. In collecting that data, they don't take cognizance. They just said Nigerian government requires 6 days. So they feel like if you offer 6 days, that's fine. And of course, if you offer 6 days annual leave in Nigeria today, or 2 weeks, nobody's going to take you seriously, because everybody knows that while the government, it is not statutory for the government for us to give maybe 24 days, it's not competitive to give 6 days, because when I know that organization B can give me more days, why will I stay with you for 6 days or 12 days? Also, when you are doing the check, when you're comparing what you pay versus what other people pay, you need to also look at your competitors. You cannot compare with anybody in the market just because they do the same thing you do. Size matters, the size of the organizations you're comparing with. The people that will most likely take the talents that you require, because remember, we're trying to remain competitive in the market. The people that will most likely take your talent are people within your business size, and the people within your industry, and the people within your location. So you'll be looking at things like location, you'll be looking at things like sector, and then size. Zenith Bank, for example, cannot be comparing salaries or anything at all with Total, the oil and gas organization, because they don't have anything. In fact, the people they require, the Total field will be needing more engineers, field engineers, offshore engineers. Though Zenith Bank is not requiring engineers to do anything for them. So they're not even competing for the same kinds of employees or the same kinds of talents. So you need to also look at things like that when you're comparing what you pay versus what the market pays. And you also have to check for affordability, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to afford what you pay, not just pay because you're trying to meet up. And I'm going to explain more why and how you can balance both affording what you pay versus meeting market need. So I want to talk about some misconceptions about pay design. The first one is that we think competitive pays means like paying the highest in the market, like matching all the top guys. And that is a very big misconception. Another thing we think is that benchmarking means copying our competitors. So if I'm in the INGO sector, for example, I'm in that sector, so I'm going to be using that a lot as an example. If I get what the UN, for example, they are like the top payers, or the USAID are paying their employees, if I'm able to get that, which is even open, they actually advertise their salary scale because they practice transparency. If I get their salary scale and I'm like, okay, I'm going to compare, then I'm going to go and pay exactly what they are paying. That's not what's pay design. That's not a strategic way at all to do pay design. Another thing to think is the same thing as one size fits all. I think that's what we practice a lot in Nigeria. We don't use data. We try to copy, use ChatGPT, use what is done abroad, and just copy and paste and say best practice. But sometimes if we look at these things, I have worked in both spaces, and I can tell you that most best practices are not designed with the Nigerian context, because Nigerians are not pace setters in that sense, in terms of best practice. So if you're looking at best practice, you're looking at organizations like the UN or the ILO, and they are not looking at the Nigerian context when they are designing those best practices. So it's not contextualized. So you can't just pick off the book and copy, because one size don't fit all. And then this is actually true. Strategic benchmarking is data-driven, affordable, and tailored. It is designed for your market, designed for your organization, and then it was designed for your pay philosophy. So some of these, like I just put some things. Many HR leaders think competitive pay means paying more than Shell or MTN. That's not true. The things to note is that you have to be fair, you have to be consistent, and you have to be affordable. Like for yourself, you have to be able to afford it for sustainability. Benchmarking doesn't mean copying. If Access Bank pays one thing, it doesn't mean Zenith Bank should pay the exact thing. Nigeria's wide gap shows why one size fits all doesn't work. A Lagos fintech cannot be in the same model as an NGO in Zamfara. I already explained that you can't just copy and paste. And then I said strategic benchmarking is using data to find the balance. Now, to say something else about the wide gap. Okay, I'll talk about it in the future, but the wide gap means because in Nigeria, we don't do strategic pay, a HR officer there's a slide I have that has I think it has a report of the range between what an HR manager earns, I think from 200K to like 1.5 million. So it's too wide. It's very wide. And you cannot just use that and say, okay, I want to find the middle and pay that middle, because like I said, depending on what the kind of skill you want to hire for your role, you have to be more strategic when designing your own pay systems. Benchmarking aligns pay with business strategy. In the recent HR design, HR is moving gradually from administrative to more strategic. One of the things that we are now doing is being partners, business partners. So HR has gone from just design, hiring and firing and administration and keeping staff out to become business strategic business partners with the organization. So for example, when you're doing your workforce planning for the next 3 years, I'm going to use the NGO sector again. In the NGO sector, you get a grant, and in that grant, is for the next 4 years. We sit down, we do what we call workforce planning. What employees are we requiring for the first year of this project? What employees are we requiring for the next 3 years of this project? So when you sit down and do your benchmarking, you are aligning your pay with your business strategy. Your philosophy is aligning with your business strategy. Let me give you an example that is clearer. So if I don't want to pay for it, if my business strategy is to, first of all, if my business goal is to the people that fit in, especially for the fintech industry, the people that fit into my target employees are like the Gen Zs or maybe younger millennials, the tech guys, and I want to pay into those people are people that I want to attract to my organization. I'll be looking more at giving more flexible work than paying more, because those guys need more flexible work. So you see how pay is now aligning with business strategy. You need to now sit down and say, what is our philosophy? What is our niche? What is our catch point? There's an organization in the NGO sector, again, that I work, that does this thing. They don't pay so well, but they have this selling point where they pay the 18%. You know, we have like pension in Nigeria, you have to pay 18%. The organization pays 10% and the employee pays 8% for their pension remittance every month. And then this organization's strategy is to pay the whole 18%. And while, when you think about it, it's such a big deal, right? But if you look at their salaries, you would see that they don't pay so well. But nobody is looking at the fact that they don't pay so well. They're looking at, oh my God, these guys are going to be paying 18%. So it's a kind of business strategy to just make it look good, And we're going to talk about communication and all the rest, how you communicate your total reward. So benchmarking and compensation design helps you to support your workforce planning. This is where you can sit down with your business leaders, the CEO, the executive director, and HR can strategically work with the business to plan and then build their compensation strategy into their business strategy and then grow from there to prevent salary inflation. Because another thing people do is they overpay in the bid to try to grab the best. I think this also happens a lot in the fintech industry, where I don't know if any of you have had that experience where somebody reaches out to you and say, oh, they just get funding as a new tech organization and they want to pay you like 5 million naira a month, no one ridiculous amount, and you go and work for them, and after 3 months they close down because they cannot afford it. So compensation benchmarking also helps with like salary inflation, because sometimes we inflate salaries in Nigeria because there's no real market data to use. And then it will reduce turnover costs when you're paying strategically. So let's talk about some of the local challenges we have in Nigeria. Like I said earlier, many firms hire like cheap talents and they're like, oh, you can easily replace. And then they don't hire top talents. But the truth is that the more you hire good talents, the more what they bring into your organization makes the organization more sustainable. Because if you want to go down the rabbit hole of what a bad employee can do, in fact, I think it's worse. If you want to go down the rabbit hole of what a bad employee can do, it's really bad. And then there's something else we do where we think because somebody can easily take off somebody's responsibilities. So you know how attrition is now. Somebody leaves the organization so suddenly, somebody takes over their responsibilities. We tend to forget that it still costs the organization, because if I am paid to do one person's job and now I have two people's jobs to do, it's going to affect the quality of my work. And so, yes, because we do not measure in Nigeria, we don't measure data, we don't do all those things. We do not literally know how it does affect, but yes, it does affect directly. It affects the output of the work, and then in little ways, it has a ripple effect on the organization, either the organization culture, or we begin to hear things like there are organizations that are really known for bad work culture. I'm not going to name names, but we know them. We see them on LinkedIn. And of course, no top talent is going to be trying to get into those organizations. Then, of course, some of the things we have is limited and reliable market data. I've talked about that. We have really limited reliable market data. If you hire a consultant to reach out to your competitors to get that market data, sometimes there's the trust issue, because the consultant is an independent contractor, but at the end of the day, you are the one hiring them. So are they really independent? And there's an anonymity that comes with giving out pay information. So Coca-Cola cannot go and meet Pepsi and say, give me your pay information, because they are trying to maintain their competitive edge by not telling you what they are paying their employees, so that you will not go and pay 1 naira above what they pay and take away their staff. So most organizations do not really trust giving their information to any organization. They just say, please, I want to compare salaries. We've had that actually. The organizations have reached out to me to say, oh, please, oh, I'm interested. Give me your, what do you pay? What do you pay? And the truth is that as much as I can, I would give you correct data, but it is not advisable, because you cannot trust that they would not want to just pay just a bit above you and beat your own competitive edge. And then the challenge of the wide pay gap in Nigeria is such a wide pay gap because we don't pay attention to data, like I said, across one sector. I mean, you see somebody is earning, especially the consulting sector, the HR officer is earning 100K and another HR officer is earning 1.6 million. I'm like, it's such a wide pay gap. Why is this so wide? It's supposed to be around the same thing, you know. And then there's another big challenge we have is inequity within the same organization. Now, ideally, not everybody in the same position should earn the same salary. There's that's why we have a salary range. So from the minimum to the maximum, you can earn within the range, depending on a couple of things like how your performance has been over the years, your level of experience, and all those other things. But sometimes it's so bad that the gap is really bad, or someone at a lower level earns higher than someone at a higher level. When you have that kind of organization, there's going to be a lot of problems. And then inflation, or the market volatility that we've talked about earlier, makes our surveys really outdated fast. Like I said, last year was like 34%, and this year we're looking at 25%. Glory to God. Comparing the two of them is just the gap is really high. It's just the fluctuation is like up, down, especially since the last 2 years, I think, or 3 years, 2023. Since 2023, it's been like up, down, up, down, up, down. And the market is very volatile. Well, there's also the informal market secrecy, which I talked about. Like nobody wants to really say what they are really paying because, I mean, they don't want to lose their competitive edge. So I have another question. Do you have any informal benchmarking? Do you reach out to people in your sphere? So because we are HR folks, we have relationships with one another. Do you reach out to people in other organizations to say, oh, what are you paying? Oh, especially in this era where the inflation is really high. How I know a lot of organizations try to do one or two things to, help with the inflation. Do you have any of that in your organization? You can just say it in the chat box if you did have that, and then if you reached out, and then if you can talk about what your biggest struggle was when you're trying to compare salaries, I would like to know. So you could just mention it in the chat box. All right, so I'll just wait for you while I just continue to go ahead. So I want to talk about the benchmarking process now. I already did kind of talked about it earlier, but I want to talk about it more properly now. So I talked about the job leveling and architecture. That's the first step. You need to design your jobs in such a way that you can easily compare them. Because one of the things when we're comparing salaries with other organizations, we also ask for their job descriptions so that we are not comparing job titles, like I said, because job titles can be very deceiving. What we are comparing is the actual talent you're paying, what is required for that role, the actual job, and not the job title. So you have to, in your own organization, design your job levels and design your architecture. Job leveling, aside compensation, is used for things like performance management. It's used for promotions and equity. It's used for designing even succession planning, for example. You need job leveling for that. If you're an organization that is very deliberate about your employees and you want to design a growth trajectory for your organization, you need a job architecture framework. So I'm going to go to the next slide to show you what a job architecture framework is and talk about it a bit before coming back to discuss other process steps in benchmarking. So this is what a sample, this is a very concise sample of what a job architecture looks like, or leveling, what the leveling looks like. So for example, you can level it however you want it to level it in your organization. I just did JL1, so 8. And this is for the NGO sector again. So for example, if I say JL1, that's the lowest rank. I'm looking at things like I said, there are sample titles. So the driver or a security personnel or an office assistant can fall under this level. The job complexity is just a routine role. You don't really have to do something unique, or your day is pretty predictable. Every time you come to work as a cleaner or as an officer, it's very straightforward. And then the autonomy is that you would require a lot of supervision. The impact is not so much. You're doing individual little tasks. You're not controlling the organization at that level. You probably are not managing anybody. You probably are not engaging with any external stakeholder. You're not engaging with a client. You're not engaging with nobody. You just come and do your job. And then the technical expertise is basic. At that level, you don't require so much qualifications. Probably require reading and writing, understanding to be able to fill logs and all the rest, but nothing more than that. Now I can compare it to someone at a JL4 who is an individual contributor. An individual contributor, in the standard job architecture, we have 4 arms, or 3, because executive and management go hand in hand. So we have the support employees are those that are usually at the bottom tier. It goes as high as maybe front desk assistants at that level. And then we now have the individual contributors. The individual contributors are those that don't manage projects or manage people. They don't manage anybody, but they are quite technical. They are like, we call them subject matter experts. So they are subject matter experts and they handle high level. So they can go as high as maybe a regional advisor for agriculture West Africa. The person is not managing anybody, probably not managing a project, but providing advisory support across West Africa. So that's an individual contributor. And then we have the management. Some organizations divide the management into two: executives. So executives are the CEOs, COOs, CFOs, the C-class or the C-suite. And then we have the managers, senior managers, directors, deputy directors. That's under the management track, call it a track. And then the individual contributor track, they don't manage people. A director is more likely to manage somebody compared to a senior advisor, you know. And then, so if we are looking at that level of J4, the job complexity is more cross-functional. They are probably interrelating with different departments. At my level, for example, I would work with finance for payroll. I will work with the HR business partners for equity design. I will work with IT for our HR because we do software, back-end software designs for compensation, communication, and all the rest. So you work with different people at different levels, and you have to adapt, of course. I have to learn a bit of IT, so I do a bit of back-end Oracle. I know how to design like on Oracle HCM or Oracle Fusion HCM. You'll be able to work independently at that level, not need supervision. You'll be able to work multi-projects, national program. You may manage supervisors, or supervise juniors, maybe not so many. And then at the stakeholder engagement level, you are partners in field offices, managing field offices or engaging with field offices or partnering with different, like I said, different departments. And then at that level, you need to have like some sectoral knowledge. You need to be able to guide someone on processes in your organization and all that. And at that level, you're looking at maybe a BSc plus 3 to 5 years experience. Sometimes in the West, they give some of the experience for qualification. So to be like BSc plus 3 to 5 experience, or like masters plus 0 experience, or BSc plus 3 to 5 experience, something like that. And then at the J8 level, of course, that's like executive. At that point, you are like driving organizational strategy, you are making decisions at country level, or doing organizational-wide transformation, you're managing entire country teams, board, you're a funder, you're a regional lead. At that level, the technical expertise is quite high, and you would require at least an MBA at that level or a PhD. So this is what every organization's job architecture, they should be able to design. And most times, to be fair, most times you require someone that has the skill to do this because it's quite complex. But you should be able to have these designs for each and every one of your jobs. So office assistants, you will place them on a job level, and then you cannot place them on a salary level. If you do not have it like this, you cannot compare with another organization because, like I said, we're not comparing job titles, we're comparing the actual jobs. You would have like probably a job summary, and then what the job entails, the minimum years of experience for that role, and like that. That's what you would ideally have. All right, so let me go back to the benchmarking process. So after doing this for your organization, the next thing you have to do is to collect data or surveys. Like I said, some people use consultants to collect data. If you have like 10 organizations that are your target organizations, like, these people are stealing our staff. And you're like, okay, let me get that data. You go reach out to them through your independent consultant, say, oh, can you give me, they'll give you a form. Can you fill this form for me quickly? And then you get that data, and then you use that data to compare your salaries. Remember, I said you also get their job descriptions usually because you want to know that the skill required for what you're comparing versus what they have is the same thing, so that you're not just comparing job titles. Or we have, like I said, in Nigeria, we don't have an organization that actually do this. My organization, we're trying to bridge this gap, but this is what's like collecting that data is what you now do. That's the next step. Remember that you also have to look at your sector and the size of the organization because that's what you're comparing with. You're not looking at you're not comparing with like big guys because you want to be, that's not how to be competitive at all. The next thing you do is your salary scale design. So you do your grades or your ranges. There are different types of salary scale. The UN, for example, uses the step scale. So like step 1, step 2, step 3. that's quite outdated. Most organizations don't use that. They just use minimum, mid, and max. I don't know if you can share what you use in your organization. For those, somebody said they had a salary scale. I'll be very curious to know what you use in your organization, what kind of salary scale you have. There's the wide range scale, and then there's the smaller scale. You have to do your salary scale design. And then there's what we call total rewards. So most organizations do not have total rewards communication. What that means is that you highlight everything that you're offering your employees, up to paid time off. I had a conversation with someone one day and she was like, annual leave is normal, like they're supposed to pay the employee. And I'm like, if anybody here works in HR, like in a sizable organization, you will know that for every employee, when we're doing LOE or level of effort calculation, we look at per day, what an employee is paid per day. Every organization does that at high level. So when you go on leave, the organization is literally paying you for not working. And that is something that the organization is doing for you. But people do not see that because we do not communicate our rewards excellently. So many organizations don't have what we call a total reward statement or a total reward. There's one organization I saw, they use that very well to, package, whenever they advertise their role, they put total reward statement, and then they'll say we offer this, we offer, and the design is always very cute and attractive. It's some sort of employer branding too. It's a way to brand your organization to show that you pay attention to what you offer your employees. So the total reward is what you offer totally. It includes incentives, if there's professional development, if you have like bonuses or profit sharing, if it's a profitable organization, everything is listed in your total reward summary or your total reward statement. And then ideally it should be shared with everybody. That way you are showing or you are elaborating on what you offer as an organization. Now, these things don't cost money, but they do something for your brand as an organization, as an employer. It makes you look big. It makes you look like you care about your employees, and this is what you're offering. You may have been offering the same thing, but just branding it like that helps your brand. And also, when you're designing your salary scale, if you are trying to, this is where the strategy comes in. You may not want to, in fact, I have designed salary scales in how many countries? I have never put anybody at the max of the market. That means I have never put them to pay the highest of the market. That is not strategic at all, which is why I keep saying that competitive pay does not mean paying the highest. It means looking for the sweet balance in the middle, between the 50th percentile of the market or the 60th percentile of the market, and then augment with like allowances, benefits. What can we offer? Data to our employees, work from home 2 days, and that's how you can brand these things. I'm offering 2 days work from home, and I'm reducing my transport allowance that I have to give you. That's where the strategy comes in. That is where you're able to put in your design to maintain your affordability. Because remember, we also have to be affordable. That is how we can be sustainable as organizations. And then, of course, the next step is to implement and communicate. I have talked about communication already and how we brand and how we communicate. It's very important. We don't do it well enough. I wish we could pay more attention to our peer communication. It's very, very important. And then we need to also review the market. I review the market every year because I feel it's important. It doesn't mean you have to adjust your salary scale every year, but it means you can still see, am I still being competitive? Is there where I can make a little bit of difference? Can I tweak it a bit? So that's why it's always good to review and update regularly. You can do it biannually, so like 2 years, every 2 years or every other year. All right, so this is like the data point I wanted to point out from the little research I did. 55% of Nigerian workers feel like they are underpaid. And there are a lot of factors why. Like I said, communication sometimes doesn't really help. 65% of employees believe that employers are not transparent about pay. This is true. And that's because there's no pay communication. Like I said, we don't really pay attention to communicating what we offer. And pay communication is not just salaries, like benefits, pay time off, leave allowance. Some organizations are so nice. They offer things like parental leave or some random leave, family leave. And you don't have a document that states it. That when you're advertising your job, you just paste that document there and say, we offer this, we offer. You don't know how much that will do for your brand as an organization. And then people, your employees will just seem to trust you a bit more. There's such a struggle to trust HR these days because they feel like we are more pro-organization than pro-employee. But branding as an organization or communication as employees, as HR is very, very important in helping with pay transparency. And then Nigeria's inflation last year, I spoke about this earlier, rose as high as 34%, but now is lower. The pay ranges in Nigeria are as wide as 80%. I already had said this earlier, and that is also a very huge problem. Things that employees are motivated by. Number one, and this is according to statistics I found online, they are motivated by competitive monetary incentives. So sometimes it's as low as, in fact, when I started designing pay, I knew we had things like retention bonus. Say there's one top performer in your organization that you don't want to let go. Of course, you know this kind of people. You just give them a retention bonus. Now, guess the strategy. If they leave your organization within the 1 year of that retention bonus, they have to pay in lieu back to you. Who wants to do that? That's a way to keep an employee, for example. So monetary, I'm not straying away monetary incentives. They are very important. Bonuses that are really tied to performance. You say, we have what we call performance bonus. You give them targets, meet this and this and this, and get this amount of money. Of course, they'll be encouraged to do that. That's how you can design sustainable systems. Another thing is work-life balance. Because of the transition into this new generation, there's a consciousness about not overworking. And that loyalty of the previous generation is getting lost. Nobody's going to stay. Sometimes pay is not even enough. So you need to be able to understand that people appreciate work-life balance. Like I said, flexible work. Are you able to do work from home for 2 days in a week? Are you able to do flexible work? Because there's what we call flex work. Flex work is not just work from home. I can take a break by 10 a.m. and come back by 12 p.m. Yes, it seems scary, like, how will this employee not take advantage? But the truth is that when you give people that flexibility, you'll be surprised at productivity. It increases productivity by 100 because that employee took 10 a.m., a break by 10 a.m., the employee will work till 10 p.m. in the night because they realize that they have that flexibility on their end. It doesn't mean you don't give them deadlines. They have their deadlines, but they work at their time. That's some of the things that people are appreciating now. That's more like work-life integration versus work-life balance. Conversation for another day. There's also pay transparency. Employees want to know that you have a salary scale, that you're not just guessing and paying anybody. They want to know that they are fairly paid compared to everybody. And like I said, pay transparency is done with proper total rewards communication. And the last one is perceived fair pay. They want to know or perceive that there's equity irrespective of gender where gender is now such a huge issue. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. Now, this is just roadmap for our take home roadmap for HR leaders. First thing you need to do as a HR leader is to identify your critical roles. For example, in the NGO sector, you'll be looking more like doctors, for health development, or like activists, or like lawyers, or like those are some kind of roles that you would want to prioritize, when you're offering pay, because those are impactful roles when it comes to sustainability. And then you need to, like I said, don't just pick anybody to compare salaries with. You need to look at organizations that are at your level in terms of context, because those are the people that you are both in the same market for the same employees. You need to be able to select the right peer organizations. You need to be able to use reliable data, because if you look for not so reliable data, they're all over the place. There's like a couple of websites where you can just click and say how much do they pay in this organization, and you see some random amounts. But that may be outdated, that may not be new. They don't update those things. So how do you know? And then you need to balance equity. I'm going to talk a bit on equity. So we have not paid attention to equity for a while, but it is coming for us. In Europe and in some states in the United States, equity is so important that they've begun to make pay transparency compulsory. Like the government is making it compulsory. If you are posting a job advert, you have to post how much you are paying these jobs. for these roles. Like you have to post it. You can't even hide and say salary is attractive. That thing we used to do. Can't do that anymore. And why this is important for us, we're not there yet. It's coming for us. So for donor-funded organizations, this is already coming into the country a bit. But gradually, we are going to, and this came about because of the gender pay gap. We know that there was a huge gender pay gap, but that is actually closing right now. I'm so glad because I'm a woman, but that's actually closing right now. The gender pay gap is closing, but because of equity, and it's not just gender, like I said, sometimes you see someone at a lower level earning someone, it's just crazy. Because of equity, pay transparency is coming for us. And very soon, we are going to get to a point where it will be compulsory. So this is the time, especially for business owners, this is the time for you to start fixing up your business. So when they say, show your salary scale or show your pay to your employees, you can boldly show your pay, knowing that you are doing just to your employees. Although we all know that employees talk about their pays a lot. Like if you feel like pay is private, I'm so sorry, that's not true, because employees discuss pay among each other. Like they know what you pay each other. So that's why these things are very important. Communication is also important. When you're designing your compensation, you have to have a philosophy. What do you go back by? Are you a remote business, for example? That's such a huge opportunity that people are not taking advantage of enough. I don't know why there's such a praise for sitting down in the office, especially Lagos people that go through the traffic every day. Have a remote system. There are a lot of organizations that do it. I think someone I know, I think in MasterCard or PayPal, they do it where she works from home. And I mean, she's working. You have to be productive because your work is measured, So it doesn't mean that the employee will not be measured or the employee will not be productive. But we need to begin to look at what kind of philosophy we are looking at. We don't necessarily have to focus all the reward on salaries. Can't we spread it across other things that would attract and still keep employees? Those are some of the questions that we need to begin to ask ourselves. So lastly, I want to talk about, I've spoken about these things, but I'm just reiterating it again. The workforce that is this Gen Z, we talk about them a lot. We make jokes. We say, oh, when you're interviewing them, they stress you. There's a lot of joke around them. But the truth is that they are the future. You are not going to throw them away. The baby boomers are steadily going out. I mean, they are at the retirement age, retiring. We still have some millennials, but there are even a lot of millennials that lean towards the Gen Z ideology where they just want to work. They are very vocal about fairness. They are very vocal. They don't take stuff. The older generation were people that could endure, just this generation, they are not going to endure. And they are the future workforce. So you have to begin to take these things seriously. They would demand transparency. They would demand fairness. I already talked about the fact that the donors and regulators are coming. And I know that there's a time that equity compliance will become a thing. When I worked in the US, we had equity reports where we have to show the government, because we're government contractors, we have to show the government our salaries. And when we do annual merit increase, we show the government the percentage of women, what their average merit increase is, the percentage of men, the percentage of all the other genders and every other thing. And we have to show the government to show that we are equitable. And if we see that there's a place where somebody or a minority, maybe blacks, are earning lesser, you have to give justification why. Like, oh, because coincidentally, maybe the performance, or you can't just say, I just decide to pay what I want to pay. And yes, we're not there yet as a country, but we are getting there. And then with inflation, with remote work, like I said, the global workforce, they are coming for your employees. And once an employee is good, they will keep you because it's cheap labor for them. If somebody is going to be doing the job in the US, you have to pay them more compared to what you have to pay them in Nigeria. So they are literally it's great. They are happy to hire somebody from Nigeria to work. And I know there's so much misconception of, yes, we do experience those once in a while when people feel, oh, because you work in Nigeria, I can't pay you, I can't work with you. But that thing is gradually going out of, like, people know that Nigerians are good. I've worked with Nigerians globally and they are very good. And people like Nigerians because they are outspoken, they are very hardworking, especially in the global space. So I'm so sorry, but the global organizations are coming for Nigerian employees. They are cheaper labor to them. And it's a win-win because when you pay them, it's also they are going to earn well here. So at this point, it's no more optional for you to begin to say, do I benchmark? Do I design my compensation? You need to do that to be sustainable long term. So before we go, I want to just ask a few questions. Please write the answers in the comments if you know, just so that I know that we understood what we did this evening. The first one is, what do you think is the first step in benchmarking process? Is it salary scale design? Is it job leveling and architecture? Is it data collection or communication? Do competitive pay, does it always mean paying the highest salaries? True or false? What does strategic benchmarking mean? And then which of this is the most important to communicate with your employees? Is it pay philosophy? Is it your peer organization's pay data? Is it your survey methodology? Or is it your HR team structure? So I'm going to leave this on here for a while. Oh, we have some responses. Let me see. Number one is B. I'm going to wait till everybody has said before I say the answers. Question 3, C. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ngozi and Chiwendu, Stella and Pascal, and iPhone users, whoever you are. Thank you so much. Okay. So I'm going to just wait for you, maybe 2 minutes or 1 minute to see, then I can say the answers. Yes, so some people have said the right answers for number 1. I'm happy. Faye, thank you. Awesome. All right. So thank you so much for everyone for responding. I'm just going to say the answer so that we can have time for questions. The first one is your job leveling and architecture. That's the first step to take because you have to have your jobs arranged well so that you can now know how to compare with your other peers or your comparators. The second one, of course, is false. Competitive pay doesn't mean paying the highest salary. Like I said, I have designed compensation I've designed over 50 salary scales. I have never put anybody to be paying the highest. That is not wise at all. That's not what it means. It means being strategic about how you pay, not just paying the highest. It helps you to even know how to remove money small so that you will save some money. And then strategic benchmarking means choosing the right peer group and considering affordability. It's very important to consider affordability for sustainability. And then the most important thing to communicate, let me see if anybody got that one correct. 4A. Who else answered number 4? Just one person answered number 4. Somebody said C, survey methodology. All right. So people should get the answer. Number 4 is actually A. Your pay philosophy is the most important thing to communicate. Your survey methodology is also important to communicate to, just so that you know that I'm not saying don't communicate survey methodology. But your pay philosophy is what's most important to communicate. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to give some time for questions, if you have any questions. Dr. Yemi, thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mercy. That was fantastic. Excellent. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, comments, or contributions, please do raise your hands so that we can grant you access to ask your questions or make your contributions. If you also want to type the questions, you can also do that very quickly. We are checking right away and also looking out to confirm if there are any hands up. Maybe you can drop your phone number in the chat box so that people can reach out to you and email too.
Oh, of course. Let me do that. Let me drop my phone number and mine. Yes, and then there's something I want to say. I am open to, since this is a mentorship thingy, I am open to looking at sitting like one-on-one sessions to have that conversation, look at an audit of your compensation structure, give my advice for free. But let's see how many people share. But yes, I am open to that.
Okay, so I don't see any hands. So once you drop your phone number and email, we can as well end this session. Thank you so much for your beautiful presentation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, at this intersection, we just unmute and we say thank you.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm really happy. I'm excited about talking about compensation every time. So it's fine.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
We're going to bombard your phone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.